When the world was burning in the fires of World War II, one Italian machine quietly emerged from the shadows, not because it was the strongest, not because it was the fastest, but because it refused to die. This was the Semovente Da-75-8, a weapon born from desperation, built on a chassis already considered outdated, and yet destined to leave a mark no one expected. Before this machine rolled onto the battlefield, the Italian army knew the truth. Their M1340S tanks were hopelessly behind the times. Thin armor, weak engines, and guns that simply couldn't compete. But pressure creates innovation, and innovation, even in its roughest form, can change the tide of war. Imagine Italian engineers staring at the wreckage of M1340s returning from the front lines, torn apart by British firepower. Every officer knew the truth. We can't win with these, but instead of surrendering to inferiority, they chose a different path. A daring one. They ripped off the tank's turret, reshaped the hull, redesigned the frontal armor, and mounted something that no one expected on such an outdated frame. The Obice da 75-18 Modello 34, a 75mm mountain howitzer with a punch far bigger than its appearance. From the first moment the Semovente rolled out of the factory, soldiers knew it wasn't just another Italian tank. It was something else, something that didn't try to copy German engineering or match British armor. It had a new identity, a low profile, a deadly gun, and a purpose that went beyond survival. It was no longer a tank. It was a hunter. Picture the North African desert, heat shimmering over endless dunes, British Matildas and Crusaders thundering forward, confident, armored, unstoppable. And then, from behind a ridge, a low, silent silhouette, the Semovente Da-75-18, hidden like a scorpion in the sand. Its crew, steady, their breath. The howitzer elevates. A single shot thunders across the desert, and the impossible happens. The British tank explodes. Soldiers stare in disbelief. A machine built on an outdated chassis had just shattered a tank that earlier seemed invincible. This was only the beginning. German officers, skeptical at first, soon realized Italy had created something unexpectedly effective. The Semovente became the backbone of Italian armored units. It was still slow, still thinly armored, still built from a platform that should have been retired, but the 75mm gun, that changed everything. It could fire high explosive shells that tore through infantry, bunkers, and soft targets, and shaped charge rounds that could punch through Allied armor far beyond what its size suggested. Now imagine the crew inside, sweat dripping, claustrophobia crawling up their necks, the engine roaring behind them, the smell of metal, heat, and cordite filling the small compartment. Every time they fired, the entire vehicle shook. Every time they reloaded, they knew the next shot might be their last. But they fought, because the Semovente allowed them to fight. It gave them a weapon that made them feel like they had a chance. Italian soldiers who once retreated, now held their ground. Rommel himself recognized the machine's potential, integrating Semovente into mixed German-Italian units. Not because of loyalty, not because of politics, but because, on the battlefield, performance speaks louder than words. And the Semovente performed. As Italy's struggle deepened, this machine became a symbol of stubborn resistance. In the chaos after the 1943 armistice, the Semovente didn't disappear. German forces seized them, reissued them, and deployed them under their own command, not as captured scrap, but as valuable frontline weapons. When your enemy takes your machine and uses it for themselves, that tells you something powerful. It works. Imagine the late war battlefields, smoke crawling over ruined towns, artillery echoing like thunder, and in the rubble, a Semovente waits, its low silhouette blending into destroyed walls. Allied tanks push forward. The gunner aligns the sight. He knows he has one chance, maybe two, before return fire obliterates them. But he fires anyway, because machines don't become legendary by being perfect. They become legendary by doing what no one expects. The Semovente da 75-18 was never meant to be a world-class design. It wasn't meant to rival Tigers or Shermans or T-34s. It was a stopgap solution, a patch over a failing armored force. But in that patch, in that moment of desperation, Italy created something that punched far above its weight. A weapon that turned weakness into opportunity. A machine that soldiers trusted because it never pretended to be something it wasn't. It simply worked. And now, when historians look back, they don't see just another assault gun. They see a rebel, a survivor, a machine that emerged from an outdated chassis and still carved its place in history. The Semovente da 75-18 reminds us of a powerful truth. Greatness doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes, it comes from refusing to give up even when the odds say you should. As the war ended and silence settled over Europe, most Semovente were scrapped, forgotten, erased by time. But their legacy lived on, in the soldiers who trusted them, in the battles they influenced, and in the message they carried. Even obsolete beginnings can create unforgettable endings. Because, in the world of armored warfare, it isn't always the biggest steel beast that writes history. Sometimes, it's the underdog with a gun that hits harder than anyone ever imagined. And that is the story of the Semovente da 75/18, Italy's unexpected punch. Born from an outdated tank, yet powerful enough to leave a mark that still echoes across the pages of war. I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes, even after all this time, and the image of those two tiny faces, so close, yet so impossibly different, flashes behind my eyes. I have to ask you straight up, because I still don't know the answer and I need to hear it from someone else. If you woke up from what you thought was a completely normal pregnancy, ready to welcome your first child, only to be handed to babies, and then discovered that not only were they conceived weeks apart, but they also had two entirely different fathers, would you think you were losing your mind? I'm talking about superfetation and heteropaternal superfecundation, a mouthful, for what was, for me, a nightmare. It sounds like science fiction, I know, but it happened to me. Two men, two different times. Two babies in one pregnancy. Was I wrong for keeping the truth from him for as long as I did? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, because I honestly can't judge my own actions anymore. It all started, as the best and worst stories do, with what felt like perfect love. I met Liam in our final year of university. He was everything I thought I wanted: tall, ambitious, with a laugh that could make me forget my anxieties. We were the golden couple, the ones everyone expected to walk down the aisle. After graduation, we moved to the city, got decent jobs, he in finance. Me and graphic design and settled into a cozy, albeit slightly cramped, apartment. Our lives were a series of comfortable, predictable steps, date nights, weekend trips, and whispered promises about a future with a house and kids. Liam was rock solid. He was reliable, steady, and he was the man I planned my entire life around. The idea of children was always an, of course, for us, not an if. It was just a matter of timing. Then, about 3 years into our life together, we decided the timing was right. We put away the birth control. And it only took 3 months before I saw those two glorious pink lines. I remember the exact moment. Liam was at work, and I nearly screamed the apartment down. I took the stick, wrapped it in a ribbon, and put it on his pillow. When he came home and saw it, the look on his face was pure, unadulterated joy. He picked me up and spun me around, tears welling up in his eyes. He kept repeating, "We're going to be parents. Sarah, we're going to be parents." It was the happiest day of my life. The day I truly believed my future was sealed and perfect. The first few months of the pregnancy were textbook. Morning sickness was brutal, but I wore it like a badge of honor. Liam was the perfect partner. He attended every single appointment. He baby-proofed the apartment in his mind before I was even showing, and he would spend hours talking to my belly. We had our first ultrasound at 8 weeks, and the image on the screen was everything. One tiny, blurry, beautiful flicker. The doctor confirmed everything was on track, gave us our due date, and sent us on our way to 9 months of blissful anticipation. This is where I have to tell you about the one thing that fractured our otherwise perfect life. The crack in the foundation that was about to bring the whole structure down. Liam's work was demanding, brutally so. He was on a high-stakes team with insane deadlines, and the pressure started getting to him. He became distant, stressed, and irritable. The late nights at the office became all-nighters, and the weekend trips stopped entirely. It felt like I was pregnant alone, sitting in our quiet apartment, watching the man I loved slowly turn into a stranger, absorbed by his career. I tried to be understanding. I told myself it was just a phase, that he was building a future for us, for our child. But the loneliness was a physical weight. It was during one of Liam's month-long work trips to Tokyo, a trip I desperately didn't want him to take but couldn't stop, that things went sideways. I was miserable, 6 weeks along, and feeling abandoned. My best friend Maria convinced me to go out one night, just to get me out of the apartment. We went to a low-key jazz club. I was sipping sparkling water, feeling sorry for myself, when I bumped into David. David was an old acquaintance from my university days, the charming, free-spirited art major I used to have a massive crush on, but who was always just out of reach. He was completely different from Liam, where Liam was structured and ambition. David was chaos and passion. We started talking, and it was easy. Too easy. He listened to me vent about Liam's absence without judgment, and for the first time in weeks, I felt seen, heard. That night, there was an undeniable connection, a spark I hadn't realized was missing until it was suddenly there. I won't give you the clean version. I made a terrible, irreversible mistake. I let the loneliness and the feeling of being neglected win. We went back to his place, and in that single, selfish, regretful night, I cheated on Liam. The shame was immediate and overwhelming. I woke up the next morning feeling sicker than my usual morning sickness. I ran out of his apartment, deleted his number, and swore to myself it was a one-time slip, a secret I would take to my grave, a mistake that would never have consequences. I was already pregnant with Liam's child. What were the chances of anything happening? The thought of pregnancy resulting from that night didn't even register, because I was already pregnant. Liam came back from Tokyo a few days later, contrite and exhausted. He smothered me with love and apologized for being absent. I put on a brave face, determined to bury my guilt and recommit to my perfect life. The next few weeks were a painful charade, full of fake smiles and quiet internal panic. I focused completely on the baby, on Liam, on the future. I was about 11 weeks along, and the pregnancy seemed normal until the next doctor's visit. The 12-week checkup. The technician was doing the routine scan, and I was holding Liam's hand. Both of us smiling up at the screen, excited to see how much the baby had grown. The technician's face, however, went from professional neutrality to a slight, almost imperceptible furrow of the brow. She moved the wand and paused. Then she moved it again, and paused much longer. She looked up at us, her voice surprisingly steady, but her eyes held a trace of confusion. "Mrs. Harris," she said, "I'm going to need to get the doctor in here. I'm seeing something a little unusual." My stomach dropped. I looked at Liam, whose face had gone pale. He squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I instantly thought, the worst a complication, a defect, something terrible with our baby. The doctor came in, reviewed the screen, and then started asking me a series of strange questions. "Did you take any fertility treatments? Were you tracking ovulation closely?" I answered no to everything. Then she did a very careful, minute examination of the screen. Liam and I watched, holding our breath. Finally, she turned the screen so we could see us. "Well, Mr. and Mrs. Harris," she said, managing a small, tentative smile, "it appears you are having twins. Congratulations." The relief was enormous. An immediate rush of air back into my lungs, followed by an explosion of sheer, unbelievable excitement. "Twins!" Liam nearly shouted with joy. He was ecstatic, already planning how he'd coach 2 little soccer teams. I was overjoyed, too, but I couldn't shake the doctor's next words. The ones that were just meant to be a minor, technical observation. It's an extremely rare occurrence, but these 2 appear to be at slightly different developmental stages. Baby A is measuring exactly 12 weeks, which is spot on with your due date. Baby B, however, is measuring approximately 8 weeks and 3 days. They are also in entirely separate sacs and have separate placentas. We'll monitor this closely, but it's an almost textbook case of superfetation, getting pregnant while already pregnant. It's incredibly rare. The word superfetation hung in the air, a technical marvel that was a personal apocalypse for me. 12 weeks and 8 weeks and 3 days, 4 weeks apart. I started counting backward, my mind racing, calculating the window. 12 weeks ago was when Liam and I had conceived baby A. 8 weeks and 3 days ago was the night with David. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The second baby, the one that was nearly 4 weeks younger, the baby that had been conceived after Liam and I already had a viable pregnancy, had to be David's. I felt the color drain from my face. I couldn't speak. Liam, completely oblivious, was beaming, already calling his mother to share the unbelievable news. He just saw a miracle. I saw a ticking time bomb. I forced a smile, congratulated Liam again, and stumbled out of the office in a daze. I spent the rest of the day in a state of silent, cold sweat panic. I reread everything I could find about It was a genuine medical rarity. My rational mind tried to find an explanation. Maybe the dating was off. Maybe the 8-week measurement was just a developmental lag. Maybe. But the 4-week difference aligned too perfectly with my one horrible night of infidelity. I tried to tell myself that the small age difference was irrelevant, that they were both my babies, and I would love them both equally. I tried to convince myself that, since they were both conceived with an egg and sperm, they were statistically most likely Liam's, just a late ovule. But deep down, the scientific and emotional truth was screaming at me. The possibility of heteropaternal superfecundation twins from 2 different fathers was now a very real, terrifying possibility. I knew I couldn't tell Liam. Not yet, not ever, if I could avoid it. The news would crush him, destroy our family, and maybe even cause him to resent the child who wasn't his. I made the conscious, difficult decision to keep the secret. I was selfish. Yes, I was also trying to protect the perfect family vision we had both built, a vision I had recklessly endangered. I reasoned that if the babies looked alike, and no one ever said anything, we could live a happy life. I was wrong, of course, but I was desperate. The pregnancy became a journey through a minefield. Every ultrasound was a terrifying ordeal. I'd watch the screen, holding my breath, looking for any clue, any sign of which baby belonged to whom. Baby A was always a little bigger, a little more active. Baby B was the little one, always tucked away. They were in completely separate sacs, which meant they were fraternal twins, increasing the probability of 2 fathers. One avoided David like the plague, blocking his number, praying he would never resurface. As the months passed, the physical burden of the rare pregnancy was nothing compared to the emotional weight of the secret. Liam was a doting father doobie, treating me like a queen. He quit the all-nighters, realizing he'd missed so much early on. His redemption only amplified my guilt. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the inevitable moment when the truth would reveal itself. I focused on the due date for baby A, which was the one that fit our original timeline. The doctors knew they would likely be born early, due to the staggered development, and they prepped us for a complicated delivery. The 9 months crawled by. Each day a new layer of dread added to my soul. Then came the delivery. It was chaotic. I went into labor 6 weeks early. They rushed me to the hospital. Liam was a wreck, holding my hand, whispering encouraging words. The entire delivery room was focused on the 2 different timelines. The doctor decided a C-section was necessary to safely deliver both. When they pulled out baby A, Liam cried out with pure elation. "It's a boy," he shouted. They whisked him away, and Liam, tear-streaked and overjoyed, cut the cord. Then, the focus shifted to baby B, the little one, the younger one. The doctor was very cautious. When baby B was finally born, there was a hushed moment. Liam looked over, and his face, which had been glowing with joy, suddenly registered confusion. Baby B was also a boy, but they were different. Baby A was a little heavier, with a dark tuft of hair, and he had Liam's distinctive slightly hooked nose. Baby B was smaller, fairer-skinned, and had a soft cap of nearly blonde fuzz. They were fraternal, yes, but in a way that screamed differences, not brotherhood. Liam stared from one baby to the other, his brow furrowed. "They look different," he murmured, his voice laced with an uncertainty that cut me to the core. I quickly cut him off. "They're fraternal, honey," I gasped, exhausted and terrified. "They're not identical. It's totally normal." I pushed the subject immediately, desperate to cover the glaring difference. For the first few weeks home, I managed to keep the fear at bay. We named baby A, James, and baby B, Caleb. Liam loved them both fiercely, but I could see the subtle difference in how he held them. He instinctively gravitated towards James, the one who bore his features. Caleb, the fair-haired one, was lovely, sweet, and calm, but he was physically a stark contrast to both Liam and me. I'm naturally dark-haired, and Liam has dark features. Caleb's fairness was a genetic anomaly in our established family line. Then came the doctor's required newborn testing. Due to the rarity of superfetation, the hospital staff insisted on thorough genetic testing for both boys, just a standard medical precaution to rule out any underlying issues related to the staggered gestation. This was the moment I had dreaded. I knew, with absolute certainty, that they would find the discrepancy. I tried everything to stop the test, claiming religious objections, citing privacy concerns, but the hospital was adamant. It was medically necessary, they claimed, and Liam, ever the by-the-book guy, agreed immediately. I was trapped. The blood was drawn, and I spent the next 2 weeks in a silent, living hell, waiting for the lab results that would expose my secret and shatter my life. I know I'm going fast, but this is where it all comes to a head. I want you to truly understand the corner I had backed myself into. I loved Liam. I regretted that night with David every second of every day. But I also loved Caleb, my sweet little fair-haired boy. And I loved James. I had 2 babies now, 2 beautiful sons. And I was about to lose everything I had with the man I loved because of one stupid, selfish mistake. Liam was planning to take 2 months of parental leave, and we were talking about moving to a bigger house, finally living the future we had dreamed of. The thought of collapsing that future over a paternity test was unbearable. I considered grabbing the boys and running, but I knew Liam would track us down, and I knew I couldn't live life on the run, lying to my sons. So, that's the situation I was in. The results were due back any day, and the truth was about to detonate in our home. I had to make a choice. Do I tell Liam the truth now, before the test results arrive, and try to salvage our relationship by showing some honesty? Or do I continue the lie, and let the test results do the dirty work, potentially destroying any hope of reconciliation? Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you confess everything and brace for the fallout? Or would you wait for the science to speak for itself? Tell me what you would have done. I couldn't confess. I physically couldn't get the words out. Every time I looked at Liam, so happy and so proud of his 2 sons, my courage failed me. I decided to wait for the results, hoping, perhaps insanely, that a miracle would happen, that the lab would make a mistake, or that David and Liam shared a very, very common genetic marker. I was clinging to straws, but it was all I had. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Liam was making dinner, and I was feeding James. The doctor's nurse was calling to schedule a follow-up appointment to discuss the twins' genetic testing. I asked her to just give me the summary over the phone. She hesitated, then said, "Mrs. Harris, the results are back, and we really need you and Mr. Harris to come in. There are some unexpected findings. We need to discuss the high probability of heteropaternal superfetation." The clinical matter-of-fact tone of the nurse was like a physical punch. I dropped the phone. Liam came rushing in. "What is it? What happened?" he demanded, seeing the terror on my face. I just sat there, rocking back and forth, holding James's tears streaming down my face. I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't look him in the eye and pretend. The confession was an agonizing, tear-filled, whispered mess. I started with the loneliness, the isolation, the Tokyo trip, and then I choked out David's name in the one night. I explained the science as best as I could that I was already pregnant with James. And in that tiny, impossible window, I got pregnant again with Caleb. I told him I was terrified, that I had tried to forget it, that I loved him, and that I never wanted to hurt him. I laid it all out there. The whole, shameful, unbelievable truth. Liam didn't yell. He didn't smash anything. He went utterly silent. His face was a mask of perfect, icy calm, which was 10 times worse than any explosion. He looked from me to the 2 babies, then back to me. He took a single, controlled step backward. "You're telling me," he said, his voice flat, emotionless, "that I have been spending the last 9 months preparing to be a father to 2 children, and one of them is from a man you slept with after you were already pregnant with mine." I could only nod, weeping uncontrollably. He walked over to the twin bath. He looked at James, and then he looked at Caleb, and I saw the betrayal hit him. His eyes filled with an unspeakable pain. He turned around, walked out of the apartment, and I didn't see him for 3 days. The next few months were a blur of lawyers, heartbreaking conversations, and shared custody agreements. Liam filed for divorce almost immediately. He was hurt beyond measure, and no amount of begging, tears, or apologies could undo the damage. He insisted on a formal paternity test for both boys, which confirmed the doctor's suspicions. James was his son, and Caleb was David's. The final scientific proof was a blow that leveled both of us. Liam was deeply conflicted. He couldn't hate Caleb, his little boy, who was completely innocent in all this, but he couldn't look at him without seeing my betrayal. In the end, we settled on a co-parenting agreement. Liam fought for and won joint legal and physical custody of James. He also, surprisingly, fought for visitation rights with Caleb. He told me, in a moment of raw vulnerability, that he had spent 9 months loving both of them, and he couldn't just turn off the love for the little boy who had no idea who his biological father was. He became Caleb's uncle, in a way, his father figure, just not his actual father. It was a bizarre, heartbreaking arrangement, but it was the best we could do for the boys. I never contacted David to tell him the truth. I made the conscious decision that Caleb would have one father figure, Liam, and no one else. I couldn't introduce a free-spirited artist into this already complicated, high-stakes situation. It was another choice I made, another secret I kept, and one I will have to grapple with when Caleb is old enough to ask questions. Liam and I eventually found a fragile, workable peace. We're not friends, but we are devoted co-parents. We attend the boys' doctor appointments together, we share holidays, and we speak nearly every day. Strictly about James and Caleb, they are for now, and they look nothing alike. James is the spitting image of Liam. Caleb is fair and looks like a miniature version of David, a ghost of my past I have to look at every single day. The boys know they are twins, but James knows Liam is his daddy, and Caleb simply calls him Liam. They don't understand the complex, impossible genetics of their beginning, and I pray they don't have to for a very long time. The house we live in is not the one Liam and I dreamed of. It's smaller, quieter, and it carries the echoes of a family that was almost perfect. The scientific improbability of my pregnancy, the superfetation leading to heteropaternal a story that lives in medical journals now, a textbook case. But to me, it's the defining tragedy of my life. It was 1,000,000 shot, the biological consequence of one brief, terrible lapse in judgment. It cost me my marriage, my perfect future, and the unconditional trust of the man I loved. But it also gave me 2 incredible, healthy, miraculous sons who teach me the meaning of love and consequence every single day. The moral of this story is not about the science, it's about the secret. A lie, no matter how small, how buried, or how scientifically improbable, its consequence, will always find a way to surface and demand its toll. I learned the hard way that life doesn't always follow the script. Sometimes, you get 2 babies, 2 fathers, and a whole lifetime of picking up the pieces. Thank you for letting me share this deeply personal, almost unbelievable chapter of my life. I hope my story, as painful as it is, serves as a testament to the complexities of human relationships and the brutal reality of unintended consequences. If you were on my side, or if you felt my pain, please like this video. Subscribe for more stories like this, stories that are strange, shocking, and all true. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I need to know if I was justified, or if I handled this terribly. I'll see you all in the next story.